What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Good Wolf Project. I'm your host, Jerry Scarlato. Today, we're starting a new series called The Lessons of History. The reason that we are starting this series is because one thing we learn from history is that we don't learn from history. Human beings do a terrible job of learning from the past so that they can make the present better, or I'll say, take different actions in the present so that they can make the future better. We do this as individuals regularly. If you've ever started a diet or started exercising multiple times, then you are a person who has not learned from history. You have not learned from your own history, your own past, what has kept you from continuing to eat better, from continuing to exercise so that you can make changes today to make yourself healthier tomorrow. If you are in business and you continue to start different marketing strategies and then stop them and start a new one and then stop it and start a new one and then stop it, you have not learned from history. You have not taken the time to look and see what you're doing or not doing that is keeping you from continuing the marketing strategy or from continuing to make more sales so that you can do the same thing today and have a better tomorrow. So we do this on an individual level regularly. All human beings do it at some level. The question is, at what point do you learn and then figure out how to change things? And then, of course, we do this on a group and societal level as well. All conflicts in history are essentially a recycled version of a previous conflict in history at some point in the past. And so you can look at those conflicts, you can look at those times, you can look at those issues, and you can look at those challenges, and you can go, well, what the hell did we do back then that we should do differently today that we can then take to improve tomorrow? What can we learn from then? How can we think differently? How can we act differently? And how can we do something different so that we don't make the same damn mistake over and over and over again? Now, of course, being that there are 7 billion people on Earth, it is challenging to get everybody aligned with that idea because we're all human beings anyway, and we're all going to have different ideas of where things should go and how things should be. And that's the way that it should be. We're all human beings, we're all individuals. So we should all have our individual thoughts and feelings, and we should all therefore do our best to fight for the things that we believe, with the understanding that everyone else is an individual and they can do the same thing. Now, ironically, what we're going to talk about today is something that actually hasn't happened in the past. It was written in the past, and it basically projected into the future and guessed how the future would turn out. Now, the problem is they just didn't project far enough into the future, although they were probably still pretty close as to where they stopped, but nonetheless, they didn't project far enough into the future. And what we're also going to talk about today aligns with the inverse of what I just said. I just said that we're all individuals and we all have the right to think a different way. We all have the right to believe a different thing, and we all have the right to fight for what we believe and what we think. Now, of course, that doesn't mean we all get what we believe and what we think. We can to an extent, but on a more macro level, maybe you can't. You can go try and find another area or another state or another country that falls in line with a more macro version of what you believe, but we cannot all have the same. We cannot all have our belief of what a macro version of society should look like. It can't happen. That's literally impossible. What we can have is a micro version of that. Of course, we can all do that. We can all create our own micro version of whatever we believe and however we want to run things and however we want to live our life. We can all do that. But what we're going to talk about today is the inverse of that. What we're going to talk about is the book 1984 by George Orwell. The book, of course, is a fiction book, but Orwell based the book off of his belief of how things would be 40 years from when he wrote the book. He wrote the book in 1949, and the book is 1984. So about 40 years after he wrote the book, this is how he thought things would. He wasn't technically projecting into the future and saying, "Hey, this is my belief of how things will turn out," but it was a warning of how things could turn out if things continued to move in the direction that he saw them moving. Now, as we'll see throughout this, George Orwell didn't have capitalistic beliefs. He didn't. That wasn't his intent necessarily. But what he saw shook him up. What he saw during his day, he grew up in the United Kingdom, and what he saw happening shook him up. Many people start with the belief or have a belief that money is the root of all evil. I've actually had arguments online with people about that same exact line. Money is the root of all evil. This is something that George Orwell actually believed. I don't think he believed that deeply, but he believed that capitalism to some degree was the issue with the United Kingdom and the United States, and that there was something better. So we'll get to that here in a second, but let's break down what 1984 is just a little bit so that you can get a background of the story. I'm not going to give the whole story away, but you'll get a good understanding of what it is. And then I want to talk about a specific part of the story. When it comes to learning lessons from history, one of the things that he talks about, or one of the things that the book conveys, is manipulation of reality, if you will, through certain means of talking and through certain means of media and through certain means of communication, all of which is dictated by the government that is running the society that is based in the book. So the main character of the book is a guy named Winston Smith. Winston is a member of the party. That's what it's referred to as throughout, is the party. But the party, or the idea that the party conveys, is called Ing Sak, which is short for English socialism. Now, George Orwell was technically a socialist. He believed in socialism. He believed that that was the future of society, and that's what would make society the best. But as far as I can tell, his belief was based around, like I said, money. He believed that money was the bigger root of evil, and that if money were evenly distributed and wasn't an issue, then everything would be fine. But what he started to see was something different. He didn't see this underlying factor that really is where it's easy to point at when it comes to money. Money is not the root of all evil. Power is the root of all evil. And I wouldn't even say it that directly per se, but if you want to put a root to evil, it's power. It is the want of power. It is the drive for power. It is the need for power. And the most powerless people are actually the ones that generally will seek power for the sake of power, instead of seek money, maybe for the sake of power, or at least seek money and let that fulfill their power need. They want power so that they can have control, of everybody else around them, everything around them, so that they can get the outcome that they want, that they believe is best, for not only themselves, but for the group as a whole. And that's what George Orwell started to see in the United Kingdom at the time, in the 1940s, was this power-hungry group that was after power for the sake of power. That was after power for the sake of having it so that they could use it to turn society into whatever they believed. So when we talk about English socialism in the book 1984, it is this power-hungry version that we're talking about. It's this power-hungry, we want power for the sake of having power, and we want to make sure that we're able to maintain power throughout history, that we want to be able to keep power as long as we can, and we want to be able to set up a society so that that idea continues to remain. Winston Smith, within the party, works for one of the four ministries, is what they're called, one of the four ministries of the government. He works for the Ministry of Truth, which is actually in charge of creating lies. There is also the Ministry of Love, which is involved in keeping law and order. There's the Ministry of Peace, which is involved in creating war. And there's the Ministry of Plenty, which is involved in economic balance, which is the way that they put it in the book. Economic balance meaning making sure that the output is not greater than the input or the intake. In other words, making sure there's not a surplus so that everyone kind of gets enough, but that no one gets too much. Everyone gets a share, but no one has more than they need, and no one has an excess amount. And that's what the Ministry of Plenty is there for. So as you can see, the book is already setting us up for an ass backwards kind of world, a world that is, we say one thing and what we mean is another thing, or what we're after is a completely different thing. So within the society or within the party is ran by, quote, Big Brother. Big Brother is just a face per se. It's not really a person. It's just a face to scare people. This is where the term Big Brother comes from. Big Brother is watching you. That is a poster they refer to regularly in the book. That's where this comes from, is the book 1984. And the main purpose of the party, the main purpose is to maintain a hierarchical structure. I'm not saying that correct, but that's okay. Is to maintain hierarchy. It's not equality, and this is important. The idea is collectivism, but it is not equality. It is 3 hierarchical structures. The top structure is the inner party. That's the top of the line. It is 1 to 2% of the society. The middle structure is the outer party. That's middle class, upper middle class, maybe, to think in our terms. And then the bottom structure, which is, I believe it was like 80% of the society, is the proletariat. That's just the people that they let run amok. And as long as they don't get out of hand, then they'll let them be. They let them do their thing. They can do whatever they want to do. They're not really ambitious. We just assume that they're a bunch of dumb idiots and we can let them run around and throw feces at each other. So the point of the party is to maintain that structure. Top, middle, bottom. Top, middle, bottom. Now, you aren't born into a class. Like in India, I don't know if that's the way that it is still today, but for a long time, the caste system in India, when you were born into a class, or a caste is what they called it, that's where you were. Like, you couldn't go up a caste or down a caste. You were born into that caste, and there's nothing you could do about it. In the society that we're talking about in 1984, you aren't necessarily born into it, and then you have to stay in that class. You go through testing to see what class you're going to be put into. Everyone goes through the test, and based on your test results, you're then put into a class. You're either in the inner party, the outer party, or the proletariat. And as we've already seen, 80% of the people end up in the proletariat. So that's where most people go. So we're still setting the groundwork, by the way, for what we're getting to. Now, there's an important idea in this book that I want to talk about that that is happening today. It is happening right now as we speak, and that's what we're setting up for right this second. So the area in which Winston Smith, the main character of the book, lives, not the area, but the power in which he lives in, is called Oceania. Oceania is one of 3 powers of the world in 1984. There's Oceania, there's Eurasia, and there's East Asia. Oceania essentially makes up the United States and the British Empire. Eurasia makes up Europe and Russia. And then East Asia is the smallest of the powers. It makes up China and Japan. Not super small, but still the smallest of the powers. And that's it. There's 3 powers of the world. Oceania, East Asia, and Eurasia. And they're at constant war. Constant. They are constantly fighting each other. One of them always, I believe, is at rest while the other 2 are fighting, and then they switch, and so on and so forth. So they're constantly at war. But they're not at war necessarily to win, because they don't believe that anybody can win. They're at war to maintain productivity, to make sure that there's not too much surplus, but to make sure that there's enough things. There's enough created, but there's not too much. There's not too much surplus. And that's why that's a big reason why they're constantly at war. So within the party, within the structure of the party that runs Oceania, the who is not the important part. And this is important. And this is one thing that is happening right now, right at this very moment. It is not the who that is important. It is the maintenance of the structure through collectivism. Collectivism meaning groupism. This group, and this group, not this individual, and this individual. And that was very apparent when Joe Biden was replaced by Kamala Harris, and there was it was just a replace. Here, put this person in, put that person in, and now guess what? We're all excited. There was never an election. There was never a choice. There was never a democratic process to let that happen so that individuals could vote on somebody who was going to be the Democratic nominee. The individual doesn't matter. It's the collective that is important. It is the party and maintaining the party and the hierarchy that is important. So that is one already clear way that this is happening. This book, 1984, which is a fiction book, is happening today. What's up, guys? I want to jump in here real quick and talk to you about achieving your goals. If you're listening to this podcast, then I know you want to achieve something extraordinary in life, whether that's building a business, getting in the best shape possible, or maximizing your time with your family. And if you want to do any of those things, there's two things you need to be able to master. One of them is time, and the other one is productivity. It starts with managing your time and being able to eliminate the things that are getting in your way so that then you can set your goals and start to break them down into actionable steps and take those steps and interject them into your life so that you can take action and turn those dreams into reality. And in order to help you do that, I created the Alpha Life Action Plan. It's literally a 90-day action plan that does both of those things. Starts with taking your time, figuring out where you're spending it, eliminating the things or delegating the things that you don't need to do so that you can free up your time to then set your goals and break them down into action steps and start to take action on them so that you can achieve the things that you want in life. The Alpha Life Action Plan is yours for free. All you have to do is cover shipping. You can go to goodwolfproject.us/action plan and put in your information there and have it sent to you ASAP. That's goodwolfproject.us/action plan so you can start to take action on those goals and dreams you want to create the life that you deserve. Now, I said before that one of the things that the government did was controlled the media, was controlled the communication, and controlled what was said and spoken to the society. And this is one of the major ways, this is, I would say, the major way that the party controls society, that the party controls the hierarchy, top, middle, bottom. This is one of the major ways that it does it. And it does it in two basic ways. One is through surveillance. So everybody in Oceania has a thing called a telescreen or television. This is like right around the time that television started to become more popular in in households around the at least the country, the United States and the United Kingdom. But they all had telescreens in their areas or in their rooms. And the telescreen, number one, was constantly blasting out propaganda, news that was controlled by the government, that was telling you one side of the story, their side of the story, and also telling you how bad the other side was. Because in the book, there is an opposition. Whether or not it is a real opposition never actually comes to fruition in the book. The thought is, or at least what you get from the book, is that it's a made-up opposition, that without an opposition, there's nothing to fight against. The opposition is not East Asia or Eurasia. The opposition is another underground party within Oceania that could potentially rise up and take down the party that's ruling, and therefore be a disaster and destroy society. So this underground opposition is created to create an idea that we have to fight against something. So on the telescreen is a combination of news about how the party is serving you and making your life better. Whether or not it's true or not, it doesn't matter. It just tells you something so that to make it sound like the party is doing good for you. And then there is news about this opposition, this made up opposition that is so bad and so terrible, and about its leader, Emmanuel something. Can't remember his last name at the moment, and I didn't write it down for some reason. But there's a made up leader for the opposition as well that they talk about. And they put this picture up of the guy, and every day, I think for an hour, they have a time called hate hour or something like that. And literally what they do is they put this guy's face up and they scream at the TV for an hour. Like that's what they have him do. They have him scream at this guy who's supposedly some underground ruler that wants to come up and rise up and take over the party and take over society. But the telescreen doesn't only do that, it also watches them constantly. It watches and listens constantly. It is constantly surveying what you're doing and what you're saying. And if there's any hint of you thinking differently than what society or what the party is telling you to think, then the thought police come and grab you and they do something to you to either make you think differently or you're never seen again. You just disappear and you're gone. And if you have a group of friends and one day you get together and one group or one friend is missing, then you know that the thought police has grabbed them. You know the thought police has gotten a hold of them. So there's actually one at the beginning of the story. There's a telling uh, whatever little incident that Winston Smith, the main character, goes through where he's sitting in his living room and he knows the telescreen is watching, but there's like one corner of his room that the telescreen can't see, and he has a journal in his hand, and they're not that a journal is a bad thing or a piece of paper is a bad thing to have, but if you have a journal, then the party believes that you could potentially be coming up with ideas to go against them. So you are a suspect if you have a journal. It's not illegal, but generally speaking, it's frowned upon. So he has this journal and he writes down an idea in the journal. And all he's thinking is, I wonder if the telescreen saw me write that down, because the thought police would then come and grab him. So that's one way that they maintain their powers through constant surveillance, constant propaganda about how good the party is, and constant propaganda how bad this made up opposition is, this made up group, this made up leader of the opposition, and how bad they are, and how much it would be terrible for society if they came and took over. So the other way that they maintain power is through the manipulation of reality. And they manipulate reality through an idea called doublethink. Doublethink. Now, this idea is not a secret. In other words, it's not something that the party keeps secret from everybody and they just do it without telling everybody. It is known. It is a necessity within the party because it has to be obvious to everybody. Otherwise, there's a potential for somebody to think for themselves. And if they think for themselves, then there's a potential that there could be ideas could spread and there could be an uprising against the party. So this idea of doublethink is literally the basis for keeping control. Without doublethink, then control cannot be maintained. And there's a passage in the book that helps explain doublethink, which I'm going to go ahead and read to you. Let me open to my page. There it is. All right, this is from the book. Doublethink means the power of holding two contradictory beliefs in one's mind simultaneously and accepting both of them. So before I read on, I'll actually say that that is a real thing. And it's not unusual, and it can be powerful in some moments, but it can also be extremely destructive in other moments. how they use it in 1984 or how they use it at the in the party, it's very destructive, which you'll see once I finish this passage. But doublethink, the technical name for it is just cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. It is exactly what that definition said. It's the ability to hold two contradicting ideas in your mind and have both of them be true at the same time. Like I said, it can be very powerful, and as a matter of fact, there are a lot of things that are true at the same time. So let's take the idea of equality as an example. Today, in the United States at least, there has never been more equality ever in the world than today in the United States. Maybe not the world, but in the United States. There's never been more opportunity for equality. In other words, everyone can work to do something and make something of themselves. Everybody can. Now, of course, it's harder for some than others. Some of them start a little, in a different demographic and it makes it more challenging. Yeah, I will totally agree to that. But as far as prejudice against races when it comes to hiring, it's never going to be eliminated, first of all, because human beings are human beings and you cannot control every human being and how every human being makes a judgment. It just can't happen unless you're in 1984, which I'm working to not let this happen. But nonetheless, so let's say that you want more equality, like you want there to be more equal outcome, not equal outcomes because that's not possible. You want there to be more equal opportunity. Cool. I'm sure that there's possibility for that. And while there's a possibility that, and it is true that there's more movement that can be done in equal opportunity, it's also true that we are in the most opportune time, the most equally opportune time in the world. Both of those things can be true and are true at the same time. They are. And they will always be true unless, of course, the party gets in control and we end up like this. So to go back to the book, the party intellectual knows in which direction his memories must be altered. He therefore knows that he is playing tricks with reality. But by the exercise of doublethink, he also satisfies himself that reality is not violated. The process has to be conscious, or it would not be carried out with sufficient precision, but it also has to be unconscious, or it would bring with it a feeling of falsity and hence guilt. Doublethink lies at the very heart of ingsoc. Remember, ingsoc is the ideology that runs the party, stands for English socialism. Doublethink lies at the very heart of ingsoc since the essence. Oh, let me try that again. Doublethink lies at the very heart of ingsoc since the essential act of the party is to use conscious deception while retaining the firmness of purpose that goes with complete honesty. To tell deliberate lies while genuinely believing in them, to forget any fact that has become inconvenient, and then when it becomes necessary again, to draw it back from oblivion for just so long as it is needed, to deny the existence of objective reality, and all the while to take account of the reality which one denies. All this is indispensably necessary. So, through this idea of doublethink, essentially what the party is doing is telling you one thing that is not true and at the same time fully believing it. And they do that not only through the propaganda through the telescreen, but they also do that through the propaganda through newspapers and things like that. They literally get rid of news that makes the party look bad. They literally get rid of it. They literally cut it out from history, and they literally replace it with something different. They replace it with an idea that makes the party look good, that makes the party look like it is beneficial, that makes the party look like it is supporting you and making you better. And that's the whole idea behind doublethink. It is to give you an idea or tell you an idea that is potentially a blatant lie, but it is this in the sole demeanor of which it is the absolute truth, in which this is actually the case. This is actually what happened. This is actually what's true. In that little snippet, it is a conscious and subconscious process. On the conscious side, you have to be precise about the lie. You have to be purposeful about it. Otherwise, it can feel not true, which is not what you want. But you also have to unconsciously forget that it's a lie. You have to not pay attention to the fact that it is a lie. You have to set that completely aside in order for it to come out as though it is authentic and absolutely true. And this is the idea that I want to really focus on, or I want to bring to light. Lessons of history, the lessons of history part of this, if you will. This has happened in history many times, and it's happening today. One example that comes immediately to mind is a guy who wrote a book, and in the book, he basically states, I don't know if this is an exact quote, but it is something like this. If you say a lie big enough, loud enough, long enough, you can make anybody believe it, and you can bring a society to its knees, essentially to your will, and have them do whatever you want them to do. The name of that book was Mein Kampf. The name of that person was Hitler. And what Hitler did was lied to a society, lied to them directly about what was done for the good of, and bent them to his will. I mean, that's exactly what happened. How else do you convince a million people to go and try and massacre and genocide a group of people? How else do you do that? Then through this idea of doublethink. Complete and blatant lies told with the demeanor of absolute truth. A couple of examples today, if you will, that I can think of. One is very obvious. Men are women, women are men. And if you don't want to be either, you can be neither. That's totally up to you. Another one that comes to mind is Joe Biden was mentally capable, fully mentally capable, until it was inconvenient for him to be mentally capable. And then he was not mentally capable all of a sudden. Once he needed to be replaced, once it was obvious that he wasn't mentally capable, suddenly he wasn't. So how you go from noticing, it's blatant to the rest of the world, obvious, super obvious. How you go from one to the other. Why else would it be convenient to shift from one idea to another idea? The opposite within a matter of a snap of a finger. Something that is so obvious to everybody else. Unless it is to manipulate the conscious of other people. So this idea of doublethink is something that is worth thinking about. And that's why I talk so much about thinking for yourself. I talk so much about not just taking the opinions of other people and then regurgitating, being a mouth puppet for other people, not just listening to what someone says and taking them at their word. Now, I'm not suggesting that you need to go out and do your own research, like being this super studious person. You don't need to do that. That's totally fine. But if you just do some basic level of looking, what George Orwell did not see coming was the internet. And the internet has been both a more divisive tool, a way to promote more lies, more doublethink, and a tool to also bring to light the truth, which is why a lot of people are starting to see what in the world's happening. A lot of people are starting to see through the curtain is because of the internet. So again, another cognitive dissonance moment. The internet is both this thing that can be utilized to tear us apart, and also this thing that can be utilized to bring light to the truth. And that's why it's so important to think for yourself, to think for yourself. What I'm not doing right now in this moment, even though it may feel this way, is trying to convince you to think the way that I think even. If you've taken anything out of this podcast episode and you're like, oh, well, this is the way that Jerry thinks, I don't need you to think the way that I think. What I need from you and what the world needs from you is for you to think for yourself. Because otherwise, collectivism is right around the corner. Otherwise, a hierarchy is right around the corner. It's not going to be equality of outcome for everybody. It is going to be a hierarchy. And there's a very slim chance that you're going to be the chosen one. It's just the way that it's going to be. So you have to choose if, number one, you want to think for yourself, or number two, if you want to go ahead and start taking advantage of the opportunity you have right in front of you to create something different for your life, for who you are, for what you want to accomplish. Because in today's society, in the world we live in the United States of America, there is still, no matter how fucked up things are, there is still no better chance, no better place for you to create whatever you want to create. There's still no better chance than where we are. So do it. Think for yourself. Recognize, keep your eyes open. Keep your brain on for a second. And don't just fall for everything that you hear, everything that you see, everything that drops in front of you. Just because an influencer that you follow, that you like, says something. Just because an actor says something. The last person you should be listening to is an actor. They're paid to lie. They are paid to create deception. Last person you should listen to. So take this idea of doublethink and think about it. Just think about it. That's all I ask. I also strongly suggest reading the book. It's pretty short. It's, I think, 320 pages, 330 pages. Pretty short, pretty easy read. And wowzers. Like the 1% that we just covered, that relates to today is just 1% of it. The rest of it, a lot of it relates to today as well. One thing that I neglected somehow, some way, is the three slogans of the party. The three slogans of the party are war is peace, ignorance is strength, and what's the other one? Freedom is slavery. War is peace, ignorance is strength, and freedom is slavery. That's the three slogans of the party in the book. And if you think about just those three slogans, which are forms of doublethink in and of themselves, but if you think about those three slogans, that's essentially, they're all what we're being fed right this moment. All of them, all three of them. War is peace. Well, we have to help Israel. We have to help Ukraine because then they will have peace. And then it's less likely that we'll be bombarded down the road with some blah, 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 blah. Is it true? We don't know. Don't know. We're ignorant to it. Ignorance is strength, though. Ignorance is strength. You don't need to think about it. Don't think about it. Don't you worry about it. Don't you worry about it. You just worry about you worry about you. We'll worry about the important stuff. You just keep being ignorant. Ignorance is strength. Don't worry about it. Freedom is slavery. Now, most people, when they hear the word slavery, they think of actual slavery, like, you know, the one that people still argue about today, which is not a thing in the United States at all. And yet we still have some feeling that we should be paying reparations for it. But everyone in the United States is a slave still, not in the sense that we think of it, but we are all slaves to the government. Let that sink in. Like, how much of your income goes to the government? How much of your income does? Can you tell me? If you think about every time you buy something, every time you exchange money in some way, shape, or form, in some direction for something, not just your income tax, anytime you exchange money, where's your money go? What are you getting? That is slavery. So through those slogans that come from the book, we're basically there. war is peace, ignorance is strength, and freedom is slavery. That's basically where we are. But you get to decide if you actually want peace, if you actually want to have strength, and if you actually want freedom. So maybe some people's idea of freedom right now is slavery. I don't, maybe that's part of it. It's just not a true understanding of maybe the values are shifting. I don't know. Uh, but unless you start thinking for yourself, someone else is going to do the thinking for you. And eventually someone else is going to do everything for you. And you get to decide whether or not you want that. That's that. Grab the book, give it a read. Until next time, here's to your 1% growth every day.